Okay, everyone, I'm going to share my screen. And everybody say hello in the chat. Tell people where you are, all that kind of stuff. So how we listen live, the knowledge to move your music forward, is why we're here. And this is the agenda. So I do a quick talk at the start. I talk about Byta, what Byta is, how we listen is, and then I go through some announcements. Some of this will be the same for people who have come before. For others, it's just a good way to learn about who we are, what we do, and why we do these events. And then part two is a conversation with Michelle and from Panache. So for people who don't know who I am, my name is Mark Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of Byta. This is a Canadian accent. Then I moved to the UK, and then I now live in Stockholm, Sweden, just to let you know my background. And again, like I always say every time, it's really good to know when you're listening to people talk about what their background is and how they came to do what they're doing, because that informs their worldview. So I started at a small indie label in Halifax in Canada back in the late 90s before the internet. Then I moved to the UK. I worked at one of the UK's most important indie labels called Creation Records. Then I worked at another label called Pop Tones, started by the guy who started Creation. And that's where I started doing radio promotion. And then I started my own boutique radio promotion company, radio and TV, in the UK after that. And then right around the time that I left the UK to move to Sweden, we started building Byta. And so what is Byta for people who don't know? Well, Byta is the platform that enables sending and receiving of digital audio in a clean, simple, and secure way, built for everyone working with music today. And what is that? In super basic terms, fast and secure audio share. Everybody shares audio. It's what everybody does. Listening to music is the key component of working in and around the music ecosystem, and that's what we do. How do we do it? I like to highlight the three things that make Byta unique, and those are: we read and write file metadata, so all that information that's embedded in the file, from MP3s or FLAC or Apple lossless to even WAV files, we read and write WAV metadata. So what you have in the file, the metadata in the file is what you see on the screen. And we also offer file format and audio quality, meaning basically that you upload in one file format, you can share in another with one click. So you upload in WAV, you can share as an MP3, you can share as stream only. Upload in FLAC, you can share it as a WAV, MP3, and all that metadata is still embedded in the files. And then the third thing that makes us unique is we've got fast yet secure streaming. So unlike any other platform, you can't rip our links using plugins, because that's what people do. They don't share files, they just rip the links themselves. So a couple things, a little background. We actually released a white paper, a research paper on the state of music sharing, the first one ever done, which explains people's behaviors about how they find and share new music with each other. And so if anybody wants that, Jamie will post the link in the chat. But then sort of further to this, you know, our mission statement is to provide artists and their teams with the tools and the knowledge to move their careers forward. So what does that mean? Well, it's pretty simple. Byta is a tool for sending and receiving digital audio. Everybody understands that. But then also we realize that people need the knowledge around not just how to share music, but knowledge around digital audio and also how the music ecosystem works. And that's what How We Listen's about. So How We Listen started out as a interview series where we find and interview people about how they discover, listen, and experience new music. And so what happened was we became quite frustrated because all of us have worked in and around music for ages. We got super frustrated that, you know, if you're reading in the press, it's always about, oh, well, you know, like just put your music on Spotify or any of the other platforms and the algorithm will pick it up and do everything for you. Or you get on the top of a playlist and suddenly everything's great. You know, your music spreads. And it's we don't see it that way. There's a lot, music discovery is a lot more nuanced. There's a lot more people involved in creating opportunities for artists. So algorithms are not your savior, and being on the top of Spotify's Rap Caviar is not a solution. And so that's why we got frustrated and why we started How We Listen. So what we also like to do is highlight a couple recent How We Listens. And this is from Kevin Bourne from Shifter. And he says, I hate receiving links in my DMs on social media. It's a lot. I also miss having a physical product in my hands, which we talk about all the time. Back in the day, it was actually pretty easy to find music you were sent because it would be sitting in a stack. And so he says it was a visual experience and not just an audio experience. And he's totally right. And that is something that's changed in the digital world. And then Stelios Vasilidis, composer, producer, and DJ, he says, let me move my little window. It's always nice to be able to have some sort of strategy in place in terms of building anticipation and marketing a product in a proper, orderly fashion. So pre-release security is fundamental to ensure your strategy can be implemented. And what Stelios is saying, I totally agree with. The only thing left is that drop, that first drop, the artist surprise, the plan of how you roll things out. And that's what security is about. It's not about leaks and people getting your music for free. It's about hearing things before you want them to hear it. So I totally agree with what Stelios is saying. And another new series we started is called Digital Dialogue. And this was actually Jamie's idea. So Digital Dialogue is an interview guest blog series written by friends of Byta. So people that we've known, that we've done panels with, people that have been on these events before. And so what Digital Dialogue does is it presents readers with insights into the challenges, successes, and passion topics in the day-to-day life of those working deep in digital. And so this does get pretty nerdy, but in a good way. And the most recent one, I don't know if anybody knows Mike, he's pretty active on LinkedIn. Mike Warren from Chartmetric and Work Hard, Playlist Hard, which I think is his book. And he writes about simplifying instant gratification tracks and collabs. So Jamie will throw those in the chat. I think there's about 3 or 4 other ones, and they're all definitely worth reading. And then here's a quote from his. To make sure you reach all followers, you need to have both artists as main artists. If you have one artist that's featuring, it won't reach their audience through the light. See, this is the kind of stuff that I just wouldn't know if I didn't read stuff like this. And this has actually come up before with, I think, the woman who did the first Digital Dialogue. She was talking about this. So it's these kind of tips that, especially people who are just throwing their music up on Spotify or Apple Music for the first time, this is super important to understand, because collabs are a way to get noticed. But if you don't follow these kind of tips, you don't get the full benefit of the reach of collabing with other people. So Jimmy will throw that in the chat. So then, okay, How We Listen live, what's the difference compared to that 10 question interview thing we do every week, right? Well, what we realized is there's a lot of people that we want to talk to more in depth, that we want to sort of delve into a subject that's a little deeper. And for the most part, this is number 13, I believe. The most part, it's been pretty heavily on digital, but now that people are traveling again and touring again, we've started doing a lot more stuff around live. We had the guy from The Great Escape on. But it's just an opportunity to really dig into a certain subject with people live instead of exchanging emails and writing comments that way. But first, we always give a little money to Maytree, which is a safe space for people who are feeling suicidal in London. It's super important to us. Hopefully there's one of these organizations in your local area, so feel free to give or screenshot this, talk about it, keep it in the back of your mind. And if you know anyone who's at risk, do what you can to help them. But we like to highlight this for personal reasons, from our team, and just wanted to say that. And then again, like I always say, this is the point where I'm supposed to talk about some blog post I've written, which I never do. So instead, I just advertise my one-page site that has all my details on it. So if you ever want to get a hold of me, hit me up on LinkedIn. email me if you ever want to talk about anything. I do have the posts I've written are pretty good on our blog, so I suggest you read those. But anyway, that's just for me. How We Listen Facebook group. All of you here will get emails about upcoming events, but if you like Facebook, it's a good way just to get pings when we do stuff. You learn more about what we're up to. So that link's there. Jamie will throw it in the chat. YouTube channel. This is sort of new. We've been putting them up maybe for the last 4 months. But the key to remember is you sign up for one of our events. If you don't make it, you can't make it, the time zone's not right. We email out a beta link, I think within the week. Then it goes out as on YouTube sometime after that. I don't know the exact timeline. And then now we even publish them to all streaming platforms as podcasts. But we don't have a set routine for that yet. We're just getting caught up. So essentially, there's no excuse to miss these things. You can share them with other people depending on what they like. You can look at me in all my different colored hats at the beach, different levels of facial hair. But anyway, you want to catch it. You don't have to come to the event. We love it when people are here, but if you can't make it, you always get a link. Yeah. And then the last slide is always who we're going to be interviewing next. So Shioma Onuchukwu, who I've not said her name yet, head of TuneCore East and West Africa. I don't think we've done anything in Africa before. We've done North America, Canada, Australia, never done anything in Japan. We should get on that. But I'm looking forward to this. So I'm trying to see what it's early for me. So sign up right away if you can. Jamie should throw the link in the chat. If not, check for an email over the next couple of days. And that's next month. Any questions, screenshot that, hit me up. I'm happy to talk. Anything anybody needs, just let me know. Now then, Michelle, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hello. How's it? So we were just before this started, we were talking. You're in where are you at the moment?
I'm in Los Angeles, where I am based now. Yeah, in Highland Park, Los Angeles.
And there's a heat wave at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like 93 degrees outside. I'm in the office now, so it's pretty cool in the office. But yeah, it's hot.
God, and it's hot. I'm in Stockholm. It's 31, so it actually matches my background. When it's minus 15, I think it's a bit ridiculous. And I'm wearing a toque. It's a bit ridiculous. But
well, so it looks like you have a nice breeze behind you. So.
Oh yeah. It's no good in the winter, but I appreciate it now. So can you tell me? So first, tell everyone what you do now, and then we'll figure out how you got there.
Yeah, so my name is Michelle Cable, and I run 2 companies, a booking agency called Panache and a management company also called Panache. And we're small, like a boutique company, but we have a pretty large number of artists. And I have staff that are in Michigan, Texas, and in California.
So to be boutique, how many people, is that under double digits?
Yes.
Is that the rule?
Definitely, yeah. I'd say our ethos kind of keeps us pretty independent-minded and feeling boutique, but yeah, we're small. I think people are always surprised at like how few people actually work at Panache, and I think the pandemic kind of created that a little bit too. But we get what we need done.
Jamie, can you throw the link to Panache in the chat so everybody can take a look around?
Yeah, so there's two websites too. I don't know if you have both of them, Jamie, but panacherock.com or Panache Artists.
Yeah, okay. Oh, there he's done. He's got both. So now when we were talking, last week I was in Calgary. I don't know if anybody on the call knows about Sled Island, but we've done loads of events with them. And so when Michelle and I met for the first time, she was telling me how Panache started out as a fanzine, and I had no idea. So I'm super... Like, can you tell me the story, like where you were living and like how old you were and how that all started?
Yeah. So I've been doing Panache in some entity, form or another, since I was about 15 years old. And I started a fanzine called Panache in Eureka, California, where I grew up in Humboldt County. I don't know how many people are familiar with like Northern California geography, but it's about 5 hours north of San Francisco in the redwoods, tucked away. They call it the Emerald Triangle around certain parts. But I grew up there, born on the East Coast originally, but lived there since I was 8 years old. And I think I love music, was pretty bored. It's a pretty isolated town. There's one highway, the 101, that goes through there. They call it the Avenue of the Giants, leading up to the town.
You've got all the nicknames down. This is
yeah,
brilliant.
it's a beautiful place. But there's a ton of redwood trees there, and it's really isolated. So being super isolated as a kid, you kind of create your own entertainment. And so I was going to shows like probably from the age of 14 or so onwards. And
sorry to interrupt though. What year was this? Was this internet?
So
where was the internet in this?
This was like probably started going to shows 1996 or so. And but yeah, so probably like AOL, was just starting a couple like around that time. But yeah, when I started as a booking agency, it was definitely like, when internet was starting to be a thing, but we were starting to call people, we were still calling people up. But I was bored, 15, 16 years of age. I liked writing, and I kind of just decided to go to concerts and interview bands and put it together into a little fanzine. And when we first started it, it was photocopied, black and white, hand collated in like a diner by myself and friends. We did like reviews of restaurants, bathrooms, personal columns, weird.
You reviewed bathrooms? Did you say
yeah,
reviewed bathrooms?
we reviewed restaurant bathrooms and festival bathrooms.
So like, but where you were living though, like were there, if the internet was just sort of getting going, like did a lot of gigs come through where you lived, or did you have to go to San Francisco?
No, I mean, I interviewed bands in that came through Eureka and Arcata. There is a college there, Humboldt State University in Arcata. And we interviewed the White Stripes and put them on the cover in I think 98 or 99. There's a lot of the artists that I work with now, I met when I was 16, 17, 18, first when they came through there. But yeah, it's the perfect stopping point to break up the drive between San Francisco and Portland. And like people, small venues, but like I saw At the Drive-In play to like 200 people at this venue called the Vista. So there was a seafood restaurant that is no longer a venue, but I would go to a ton of shows there. And it was called the Vista. And but yeah, that's where the White Stripes played. But yeah, there was a lot of great shows. I mean, eventually we interviewed the Flaming Lips in San Francisco, I believe, at the Fillmore. I would travel to interview bands, but most of the bands I interviewed were touring bands or local bands from the town. And I think anyone who's on this, like Zoom, that are from like a small town, or like a more isolated area, you're just really hungry to meet new people. And so by interviewing people, especially at the age of like 16, 17, I was just, eager to like hear about what was happening outside of where I lived, because I was kind of in like a, a small, really small community. And so I benefited a lot from kind of like hearing about other people's lives in, big cities. Eureka is 30,000 people. The town I actually lived in, called Fortuna, but I would go to school, and most of the magazine really started in Eureka, but it was like 10,000 people. Really small.
So if this is sort of early internet, like when you're interviewing the Flaming Lips, do you just find out who Scott Booker, their manager, is, and get his phone number and call him and say, "Hi, I run a fanzine"? Is that literally what you did? Like,
yeah, I mean, I know Scott. Scott's great, and I can't remember how it came about, but I think we maybe wrote their agent, or maybe I talked to Scott. I've known Scott for a long time. It's been over 20 years. But yeah, a good story that I love, that's kind of like a good one to tell because of someone that I work with that just retired. But this band Raining Sound, my friend sent me a cassette tape. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
oh yeah.
So they're one of my favorite all-time bands. But way before I was working with them, a friend of mine just sent me a package that had a Raining Sounds dubbed, you know, mixtape.
Cassette.
It was a cassette. He recorded music and put it on a cassette tape. And I didn't realize it was a contemporary band at the time. And this is, you know, like 90, whenever that album, or like whenever Time Bomb High School came out. But, you know, the internet was around. I think I loved the music, didn't realize it was contemporary, then Googled them and realized, oh, wow, like I could go see this band live, and saw that they were playing in San Francisco, and probably went to see them there first, but then got in touch with the singer, Greg Cartwright, and ended up interviewing him for my zine. I think they were opening up for, this is like probably more when I was like 21, 22, but they were opening up for The Hives at a venue in San Francisco, went to that show, you know, and kind of developed a relationship. But, you know, I think back then, you know, if you did enough hunting and Googling, or maybe Google wasn't there, but whatever it was, like, you know, like finding the right
Yahoo.
website.
It was Yahoo.
Yeah, Yahoo. Yeah, like, oh yeah, my email was Yahoo too. Like, actually, it was Hotmail at first. Panache magazine at Hotmail was my first like work email.
Not working. Doesn't work anymore.
Yeah,
Don't use that email address.
Doesn't work. But yeah, don't use that. But yeah, I mean, you know, it was kind of a cool tool where if you really, I kind of found that if you liked an artist and wanted to figure out how to get a hold of them, you kind of could, you know, to a certain degree. And so me and various people that wrote for me, because I ended up having a group of writers that would write for me, we tracked down people and either interview them. Greg, I interviewed on the phone from Raining Sound, and eventually ended up working with them years later. But with the Flaming Lips, we went to their show and had talked to them in advance, and you know, they agreed to do it, and you know, we put them on the cover. Yeah, it's kind of varied, you know, how we hunted people down.
So, but like the thing is, like, you're like, okay, I want to start a fanzine. You didn't say I want to start a fanzine and then turn it into a booking agent and then start doing management. Did you even know what booking and management was, or?
No, I mean, this comes up a lot where, you know, I feel like at that age, I just needed something to kind of entertain myself, and I wanted to create. You know, I definitely didn't really think about the outcome of it or how it even was being received, you know, by people. I look back at some of the old zines and some of the stuff I put in there, you know, like editorial pieces I put in there are pretty embarrassing, you know, like things I wrote about. You know, I was 16, 17, you know, pretty raw, like just like writing about whatever, you know, and not really realizing that, I mean, I had no idea that what I'm doing, you know, I'm turning 40 in a month, and like what I was doing then would still be applicable in some way and under the same name, you know, 24 years later. And, you know, but I did it because I was bored and I enjoyed music and loved hearing stories and getting to know the musicians and the story about the songs, the albums, you know, but there was no, this is going to take me, you know, somewhere else. But I did get really engrossed in what I was doing and started booking shows through the fanzine because I was organizing concerts to release issues of the magazine. So we'd have bands that I'd interviewed play the concert, and that kind of led me to being a promoter, and then that led to me being a booking agent. And you know, and then, you know, it was just like one step led to this step, you know, and it kind of evolved. And you know, eventually I stopped doing the magazine, but I did the magazine on and off for, you know, like over a decade.
So you do the magazine, right? And then you're like, okay, I need to book some bands. So you book some local bands, I'm assuming. And then you're like, oh, I hear this band's going on tour. How long before all the other agents started calling you? Because isn't that sort of the way it works? Oh, like, she's cool. Everybody's got to do that route. Like, you can trust her. She pays well. She treats the bands nicely. She does promo in advance. Like, how quickly did it get around that you were good at your job? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was surprised it happened, you know, it happened pretty fast. And there was definitely a few early agencies that, you know, are no more. Some of the folks at those agencies are still agents, where it was like, you know, how do I break up this drive? Or, you know, like, you know, Humboldt County is known for its like marijuana, you know, like there's an artist that wants to go through there. And, you know, like it just, you know, it was a popular place to go. And the experience is normally pretty, you know, unique. People would come out, it'd be a very like, I don't know, like kind of like brilliant, weird, you know, like Twin Peaksy, you know, like experience at the show. And so it was memorable. And so, and a lot of artists would want to come back through there. And I think, I promoted the show. People would come out, you'd sell merch. I was reliable. It became like the main thing I wanted to do. Like, I started to live and breathe, you know, working in, you know, like a music world. And I homeschooled my last year of high school because I was so involved in what I was doing.
Really?
And like, I think everyone around me was like, what are you what are you doing? But I was pretty driven, and it was starting to do well. The zine eventually went from, became more of a magazine, but went from being like 400 copies that I was, photocopying to the highest I think we distributed was like 40,000 copies.
Wow.
That, and that's when it went to a printing press. It eventually became color. And, and then all the various people that I'd met through booking shows, I would kind of say like, oh, is there someone that, in Nashville that I could send magazines to and have them distributed? So it was really like independently distributed through a network of people that I had created. And then, it was probably like a handful of agents would use me for artists, but I wasn't booking like 5 shows a night. I was doing like 1 or 2 or 3 shows a week. I mean, I was doing a lot of shows.
But that's a lot of shows for a 30,000 person town. Like that's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. But there was like still, in my memory, like the music community that I grew up in really shaped what I did and who I became. And I'm so grateful for that experience, for all the people that were there around that. And and it would be great because I'd book a bigger like touring band, and I could put a local band that I knew on, and they would get new fans through that experience. And then people from the neighboring town, Arcata, where there's college. There's a couple colleges. There's a community college near Eureka, and then the main college was Humboldt State University. But people would start coming from Arcata. I would do shows in Arcata. But there was a big college community that wanted to go out to shows, and I would book shows in various taverns. I booked shows in a Denny's, like a restaurant.
Who played at Denny's? That sounds awesome.
I can't remember, but I do remember that we had to stop booking shows there because an underage kid peed on a cop car. So we got in trouble. Like, so they stopped doing the shows there. But talking about reasons of why you want to play a venue or go through Eureka, I remember that one of the perks was you could drink all you wanted from the bar and order anything off the menu, including like steak and shrimp. I think that was like
including steak and shrimp. Is that the big thing? Yeah,
appealing to some people going through Humboldt. But no, it was I booked shows all over the place. I organized a festival for a few years called Bummer Fest that was in a veterans hall. Yeah, we got pretty weird with some of the stuff we did there. Always entertaining. But eventually I left. I moved when I was 21, so I did that for like 5 years there, and moved to San Francisco. And in Humboldt, I was definitely kind of like more of a, had felt comfortable. I kind of developed what I was doing and felt confident that people would want to go through me to book shows. But when I moved to San Francisco, I didn't really think that anyone would want to use like some small town person that moved to San Francisco where there's already people that are established doing stuff. But a lot of people, bands, and some from agents, trusted me so much, they wanted to keep using me in the Bay Area. So that kind of really helped what I was doing grow.
And is okay, like, so you moved to San Francisco to continue booking, but just do it at a bigger level, or?
Yeah, I mean, I at that point I'd done a couple of tours, but I didn't fully have a booking agency. But I booked a couple of small tours for like friends, bands, and on a really small level. And I think the magazine, I would say, was still the main thing I was doing. So okay. I think for a lot of people in Humboldt, if they do leave, the natural evolution is to move to the closest city, which was San Francisco. And so I did that when I was 21, but kind of didn't plan on promoting shows to promote shows there, but I did. And but was doing the magazine the whole time, and that was the main focus, but promoting shows. And then around that time kind of fell into being a booking agent, like about probably like a year and a half later, because I was still working random jobs, at that point. Yeah, like there was income that needed to be thought about.
But did you make money from, sorry to interrupt, did you make money from doing gigs? at home?
No, I think I didn't even take a commission as a promoter. I just did it to do it. I'm thinking back now, like I did. I mean, that's probably why people like working with me too, is because I took no promoter commission. You know,
You can pee on cop cars and
yeah.
there's no commission.
And you
It's
can
brilliant
dine on
down there.
steak and shrimp.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the beginning, I don't think I was just doing it because I enjoyed doing it. I wasn't like taking any sort of, fee or anything. But I for most of the smaller shows, a long time ago. But eventually when I moved to San Francisco, I worked a few random jobs, and then I ended up working at this retro sneaker shop in the Mission District. And that's where I met a lot of amazing people that kind of were formative in my life for the years to come. And that shop closed though. And when that shop closed, I took a risk and started trying to like work in music, full time. And a really good friend of mine, who I'd met through Eureka, through booking their old band, Kung Fu USA, this band from New York who are still around today, called Shell Shag, a two-piece. They had become, close friends of mine, and I met them when I was 16, 17 in Eureka. And they were kind of like, we'll hire you and pay you a monthly stipend to just book us, forever. So I was kind of their solo booking agent. I only worked for them for the first year, and I can't remember what it was, but I booked them across the country. Like they toured all the time. I think I booked them 17 times in New York in like a year or something crazy. They were from the Bay Area at the time, but they were just, it was back when before internet was really like a thing where people discovered music, where back then touring was really how you heard about bands. You'd see a band live, and and then the way you'd grow your audience would be to go back to that town. Like maybe more people would come out, sell some merch, go back to that town again. So you might play the same town like 3 or 4 times in a year. And so I probably booked them like 200 shows in a year. And I just, was super focused on that. And then we ended the tour in we ended the year of touring in Japan, because I'd gotten close to this artist from Tokyo called DMBQ, and they the two bands toured together in Japan. And yeah, it was like this amazing celebration of this kind of epic year of touring. And then slowly, gradually, I think DMBQ and other bands, smaller bands, started asking me like, oh, would you book us too? And then the booking agency, like Panache, kind of fully evolved into a booking agency with multiple artists on it.
And how many years was that from starting the fanzine to moving to San Francisco and being a booking agency, do you think?
Say like 6 years or so, like 6 years. Yeah.
Okay, because what I want to do is I want to jump now to today, because I purposely wanted you to talk about how nuanced and small, and you did this and this happened, and because I think people, they imagine that, oh, she books bands. She just suddenly got all these bands right away one day, and she knew what she was doing, and and like in the word of mouth thing, which I'm curious to know what it's like today, booking tours and you as an agent finding new places to play. Are there similarities to the way it used to be? Is it the same with different sort of qualities, or is it completely different? Like, what do you think of the contrast of when you started booking gigs and putting on gigs, booking tours and putting on gigs, and the way you work today, do you think?
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, the way I work, it's still pretty similar. It's vastly different with the level of shows I'm doing, and the way, like back then when I first started, if the show got canceled, you might not find out until you're at the venue, like, and then you find out, now you might see it on a social media post, and like find about it that way, or the promoter, tells you, depending on, what level of show you're talking about, doing. But back then I was definitely working with a lot of smaller bands, some pretty weird noise bands too. And like, I'm working with very young promoters. I think when I first started, I was working with, like legitimate, promoters, but definitely like companies like AEG and Live Nation didn't have as much of a stronghold on like all the venues across the country. There's promoters that I still work with now that I worked with for well over a decade that started off as independent promoters, but now work for bigger companies like Live Nation or AEG. So I
Because
think back then
they bought all the venues. Is that correct? Like over the last 15 years, they like, and so you've got to work with them to get into certain venues. Is that
they
correct?
bought a lot of the venues, or they realized, oh, this person has cultivated something in their town in Philadelphia or Atlanta, and so then they eventually offered them a position. And I mean, it makes sense, but they've also bought up a lot of the venues. But I would say one of the main differences is back then, if you looked at the scale of who I was working with, it'd be very, it differ, band to band, there'd be a wide range of promoters. Now I feel like, you kind of know there's probably like 3 people I'll hit up in this city, especially if, an artist, like Ty Siegel, who I work with at OCs, they tour every year, and they kind of like have gotten into a routine where they know what to expect. They like this venue, like their fans like that venue. So you kind of return to that venue a lot of times. We switch it up a lot too, but I would definitely say my Rolodex of people I work with has kind of gotten more fine-tuned. I'm definitely also not, I love trying to work with small, younger promoters, when I can, but it also doesn't exist, that much anymore in the major cities, or in the bigger cities.
But that's what I was going to ask. Like the Michelle of today, would she work with the Michelle of 25 years ago? Like,
for sure. Depending on the city, for sure. Like, and I still book bands through where I, grew up in Humboldt. And some of the people I was really close to own clubs there now, and there's other companies I know that have hired that 16-year-old kid that was super eager to learn, and I love trying to give more opportunities to the younger promoter. I think now, especially with COVID, but the unfortunate thing is you can't really be as experimental with touring. You kind of have to and the most artists I work with aren't 21 anymore. They're in their 30s, and they're not trying to do, I remember when I first started working with Mac DeMarco, who's one of my longest clients too. He wasn't going to cross the border, and so he just wanted me to book a bunch of shows for him, and he just wanted to be on the road for 2 months. So I was booking him in weird towns in the South. He went down to Florida, and it was kind of like he'll play for anything. He'll just play this tiny place, store deal. But now when anyone goes on the road, especially because of COVID, because people weren't touring for 2 years, it's hard. You need to maximize what you do in a short amount of time. Most people I work with, and I've realized this as somebody who puts people on the road, that, max 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, really max is kind of the best scenario for maintaining like morale and mental health. I remember one time a young artist I worked with wanted to tour for 10 weeks, and their management agreed to it. And that's, 10 weeks straight. That's like, a lot too long, But as I'm saying this, there's definitely, one of the artists I work with, King Gizzard, just wrapped up a 3-month-long international tour, but we had breaks in between where they took some time off, and I think after not touring for 2 years, when you're an international act, it was kind of like the way we had to do it. But that was like the largest tour they've ever done in their career. But normally if I'm organizing a tour, normally the rule is like, we need multiple days off per week, not a certain amount of consecutive days, and 3.5 weeks or so, to keep people healthy and happy. And people, a lot of the artists I've worked with since they were 20, 21 are now in their 30s, have families. So what I'm organizing around is very different.
But that's also, so it's, you've grown up and matured, and your business matured. But like, if you think back to that famous photo of the black flag calendar, where it's, everything's crossed out and stuff, and that was what, like sort of early 80s. Do you think that the way people, like you've mentioned mental health and all that kind of stuff, and I don't really think that most bands were thinking about that 25 years ago. It was like, oh, you go on tour for 6 weeks. Like, do you think people have a different view of that kind of stuff now, that you're going to burn yourself out too quickly? Do you think that comes up even with smaller bands? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think it's a level of what is possible now because of, streaming and online sales. people can have other streams of revenue, but back then touring was a main form of revenue for artists. It's also how they got, like I said, it's how they got exposure. It's how they expanded their fan base. It's how they sold merch, you know, like, and now that's different, you know. So, but I think a younger artist, they might have to be on the road for longer because that's how the tour is going to be sustainable, you know, like as well. And maybe they're ready for it, you know, maybe they'll do it a couple times and then that's it, you know. But I think most artists that have been doing it for a while, they kind of understand their limits more, and it's not as necessary because they have other revenue streams that are coming in and not relying on, you know, show income. Or, you know, I think now too, what's different than what I was doing then is I have a lot more relationships with, and the artists I work with have grown, where someone could play a festival and, you know, get paid what they would make off of a 3-week tour to play one gig at a festival, you know, like,
Is
and
that
stuff.
really,
You know, depending on the artist, you know, I mean, it depends, like, you know, and, you know, but touring right now is super, and we talked about this in our intro call, it's very difficult and it's very expensive. You know, the gas prices are insane, flights, and anything that you need to book in advance for a tour, hotels, flights, transportation means like a bus, you know, van, you know, everything is more expensive than it was a few years, you know, a couple of years ago. Everything's been affected by inflation. And, you know, and I would say that most promoters and agents would probably agree that, you know, ticket sales are down. You know, people are waiting to the last minute to buy tickets for a show, or they don't want to assume the risk of going to a show. And so, you know, touring, which seemed kind of like a no-brainer before, like, you know, go on the road, you know, you'll make these shows, you'll make the money from these shows. Now, you know, because of COVID, but you don't know if you'll actually finish the tour. So you kind of have to assess the damage of,
that's scary.
if you go on the road halfway through the tour, you might have to stop because of COVID or weather, you know, and then your expenses are 30% higher. You know, I mean, it changes the way you look at things. And, you know, and as a booking agent, yeah, definitely how I work is different in some ways than when I was a kid. And definitely, you know, like my approach is different because of the level and the age of the artists I work with, and also just their experience levels too. But also just the environment has changed so much as well.
So one thing, if anybody's got questions, throw them in the chat and I'll look in a second. And I want to talk about some of the stuff you do now, like the management and all that kind of stuff. But first, you were talking about helping other newer agents out and stuff, and, you know, people getting exposed to learning how to do things. But what was that? What was that story? You went to work somewhere. I thought this was interesting. You went to work somewhere to learn because what I think is interesting about you is you just pulled on the string, it seems, and you got more and more info and you learned. But you didn't have any sort of official apprenticeship, but you did go to work at an agency, right? Is that what happened?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times people ask, like, did you have a mentor, you know, like that did what I did? And I really didn't. You know, I would definitely say, like, that band Shellshag I mentioned gave me a platform to book them and grow, and believed in me, you know. And but yeah, I didn't intern at an agency and work my way up. You know, I interned, what you're talking about and what we talked about on our call is that I did when I was 21. I won't name the agency, but I took an internship for you know, like to gain knowledge, to maybe get some contacts and learn from someone who had been doing this longer, you know, worked with more legitimate artists. And, you know, I think I did a 4-hour day in their office in the Bay Area. And I, you know, I think it was like Yahoo map quested a route for Peaches. And and then I
never to be seen again.
No, and then I found out, like, literally later that day or the next day, that I was going to be let go as an intern because they thought I wanted a job there. And you know, I mean, and I was a free intern, you know, like I was just there to kind of, you know, learn the ropes. But I guess my presence in that 4 hours while I was map questing was intimidating in some way. They thought I'd demand a job. So anyways, they fired me as an intern. Totally fine. Was kind of funny, but yeah, and then so I just kind of was like, okay, I'll just keep doing my own thing. And people I know that were booking agents gave me, you know, contacts if I was like, you know, who books this venue? You know, because I was so green at what I was doing. At this point, I was like 21, 22, but I would just ask people I had helped out over the years that were in higher up places, working with larger acts, like, oh, could I get this contact? And then kind of just built my own relationships and stuff, and then later on, someone from that agency told people that I worked there, and that's how I got my start, which, is a
But
joke.
that is the weirdest thing ever. Oh, she's too, like, she's too good. Like, but there's this guy named Robert Greene. He wrote a book called The 48 Laws of Power. And he also wrote one with 50 Cent. And one of the 48 Laws of Power is never outshine the master. So the idea that people above you all the time, if your map questing is better than anybody else in the office, you're going to be removed. And it seems that's what happened. It's like, you were too good.
It was such an absurd thing, but yeah, so, I mean, I definitely wasn't in an experience where someone was really like, yeah, let me show you the ropes and do this and that. So, now, I mean, COVID has changed things where we don't have interns in the office. I'm also like a mother of a 3-year-old. And so I think my ability to kind of like mentor, younger folks that want to get into this, my time is, more limited, but for a long time, before I became a parent, I would try to hop on a call with various people that wanted advice on like how to start something, or answer, answer little surveys. I used to do panels, across the world, went to Sled Island as, I think as a, doing stuff there, but went all over the world kind of talking about how I started to kind of give people, more of a background that you don't, you can have a sustainable business in the music industry, and you can do this as a woman too, independently, without having these things in place, because the fact that I'm even where I am now is actually really shocking to me when I think about like my, like how far I had to work or how hard I had to work to get here, but I was just blindly motivated by, like liking music and being encouraged by the bands that I helped, like bringing them success or, like joy, like it was motivating. There was no financial, there was no real like financial goal in mind. I think just being able to sustain myself after, which is what happened when I was like, had just moved to San Francisco and started working with this band, like I just lived frugally and could make it work, and then just kind of like grew from there. But, I think now there's so many young bands, we talked about this on our call, there's so many young bands that I wish I could help and take on, and grow like I did with bands that I've worked with now for a decade. But, I don't have the capacity to do that. So I think it's really important to have younger people, or, it doesn't matter what age you are, but people who are maybe like just getting their footing in this world, help out younger artists to help them grow to this place. Because a lot of times someone just needs someone that's going to like be there, believe in them, like support them as an artist and encourage them and help them figure out like kind of basic things. And if they're good, they'll grow, like with the right people behind them, like and so I encourage that, so I encourage anyone to start a small agency or become a small promoter. I don't view that as like, competition. I love it because so many of these bands ask me for, like, well, who should I hit up? And there's a select group of people that I'll suggest, but they're all really busy too. It's hard. I think it's hard to find a good motivated person to work for you who's doing it for the right reasons now.
So you mentioned as a woman, did you notice any, maybe not pushback, but indifference maybe as you were coming up? If you look back now, do you think, or did that play a factor in any positive or negatives, do you think?
I think I think I was probably young enough to not realize sometimes when somebody would not take me seriously that it was because I was, a woman. I think, like I wasn't clearly aware back then when I was really young that maybe the way I was getting treated was because of a certain thing. I think in my benefit, people didn't expect a certain fierceness in me and like motivation to not like, like, and I know, I think it surprised people. Like, they thought I'd be like a pushover or not, speak up. I mean, definitely, like like, probably 100 times I've heard like, like, oh, well, not told directly to me, but maybe an artist I work with has been told like, well, you really need a man doing that job for you, like, because they get you
Really?
better
Like
money,
people
or
have
like,
actually said that to the
yeah,
bands.
people say that, like still like
Huh.
to this day, people say that, and I think there's definitely more equality out there, but when you look at numbers of like, like CEOs or, women ran like companies, it's pretty marginal, like it's small. And so, I'm trying to always diversify our, like my employee base too. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, there's stupid comments that people have said to me, assuming that the reason I am in my position is because of something, I mean, it's, like
Other
sexist
than your
essentially.
hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and you're kind of like shocked that that's even something that someone would feel comfortable saying to you, like,
Well, exactly. You think, oh,
yeah,
there's people thinking things in the background, but the idea that anybody should have to hear such idiotic comment, it's shocking. It's really
yeah. I mean,
shocking.
it's shocking, and
Yet
but
not surprising at all.
but not, yeah, exactly. And I always took that, those challenges, and it kind of just fully, it was just more, motivation to kind of prove people in those positions of power wrong, and be like, I can get this artist paid what you think I can, or, or I'm going to stand up and, win this battle, and do all those things, because I definitely don't think, my, like me being a woman, like has let any of my artists down. If anything, I think it's actually helped them, because I've been able to like help, shape their careers with a certain finesse and grace that, like was unique to my approach. And, like I definitely am not the type of person to just like yell at a promoter until I get what I want, But one time, and I think I've told this story a few times on podcasts now, but one time an artist I work with called me the Velvet Hammer, which I thought was kind of appropriate for the situations that were coming up, like with stuff. But yeah, I think people have been surprised, like at how much I've been able to do, in for whatever like smaller position they thought I, was in, and so I think I like to hopefully encourage other people who don't have, certain financial backings or support from a larger company or like that right mentor to like, you learn through trial and error. I definitely made a lot of, mistakes, along the way of how I was approaching things. I wish I'd learned this before I did this, but I kind of learned as I, went along in the process, and I did it all, I went on the road with bands, and, I was like tour manager, I've worn a lot of different hats. I've sent out press releases for bands, I've tried to wear all the different hats so I understand the whole, every piece of the puzzle of the music industry, and and kind of landed, where I am now, and feel good about like working as a booking agent, but also kind of through helping younger artists that I was getting really close to as a booking agent, kind of doing de facto management stuff for them, and that eventually led to a more official role as a manager for a select number of artists, and and that I think allowed me to be more integral in their careers and their successes. And, that was really rewarding because, I've been booking shows since I was, like 15, 16, so like 20, 25 years.
So let's do two questions and then we can talk about this evolution. But the one thing I was going to say, actually touring with a band and sitting in the van for 3 weeks, selling merch or whatever, it's a whole different world when you see it from that perspective, how boring 95% of it is and how important the show is, and how, so I recommend anybody who can go on tour to do it, because you learn so much about what it's like to actually be in a band. Like, it's not New York every night, it's Boise, Idaho, and Eureka, California.
Yeah. And I think as a booking agent or a manager, whatever you do in the music industry or want to do, like when you're on the road and you see the actual result of what you're doing, like if you don't do it, like if you're the booking agent and you don't actually do it with any sort of real like thought and care, and you just send someone out there and you don't try to make sure it's the right venue.
Yeah, or
You know,
10-hour drives 3 days in
the
a
right
row.
ticket price. Yeah, you're thinking about the distance, you know, like the quality of the venue, making sure that all the right information is there. You know, like it can be really haphazard and, you know, a mess. I mean, things just happen, you know, it's not all, you know, there's so many things that are happening now, but, you know, I think you learn to really understand what an artist goes through on the road. And then you know, I think it makes you better at what you're doing because, you know, you're thinking about the fully realized, you know, and, you know, thing like as you're doing it. So, you know, there's a lot of thought and care into what I do, and you know, and I, you know, try to, you know, make sure that everyone I work with is, you know, is like safe and healthy on the road.
So one question from Kent says, could you talk about your relationship with promoters and what they do versus what you do? And is a promoter synonymous with a talent buyer? Because talent buyer sounds like a very, like that just sounds like a booking agent at a bigger company. But can you sort of talk about your relationship and promoters and talent buyers?
Yeah, so I normally have a list per city of like, you know, this is, maybe it's a talent buyer who's, you know, normally a talent buyer would just be someone hired by the club to book all the talent in that room, you know. So, you know, say like, you know, New York at like Webster Hall, like there's a talent buyer that books inside Webster, they book all the shows in that calendar. You know, sometimes outside promoters will book shows on that calendar too. But, you know, they have a specific set of rooms that they are the in-house talent buyer for. You know, and I would say definitely like their job is kind of more of like, okay, we're going to fill the room up, fill the schedule up, fill the calendar up for these shows, you know, and, you know, they're thinking about like ticket sales and stuff too, but there's probably a set of, you know, more promotional team, you know, within that company that also help promote the show too. I mean, you would like to think that the in-house talent buyer thinks about how the show's going to do. And so they're going to also help you promote the show. But they, you know, have a pretty set, you know, like list of, I need to do this, fill this calendar up. And so they're kind of knocking that off first. And then depending on the size of the company, then there's a select number of people that will be more of like in-house promotional team working on that, you know. But a lot of, I mean, you know, like I can pick and choose who I work with. So I always want to find a in-house talent buyer that also will act as a promoter, you know, that cares about the show, you know, too.
So, okay, so sorry to interrupt. So like a talent buyer is just filling up the schedule. A promoter would be someone who fills up the schedule and then says, how am I going to make this the best gig possible? Is that sort of?
Yeah, I mean, I would say an in-house talent buyer can be a promoter too, but they might also have more of an agenda of, okay, we need to fill up this calendar. And then there's a promotional team that will kind of like help promote the show further. Okay. But then a promoter who sometimes might be an in-house talent buyer, because a lot of people wear different hats, you know, might be someone that will, you know, they promote shows everywhere, you know, and they're assuming all the risk, you know, and they, you know, so they will have their own methods of actually like promoting the show at whatever venue they do. And they can kind of, you know, like a lot of times I might have an idea of like, I want to do something different with this artist. So I'll go to this, I want to take them to this next level, or I want to do something smaller. Maybe it's going to be an acoustic show. A lot of times I'll go to a promoter who I've worked with because they might have more creative ideas of like all the different venues that they could go into, or maybe avant-garde venues, or, you know, out of the normal, you know, venues that are, you normally see artists at, you know, where they might get creative as a promoter and, you know, like do something different in a room and then use all their resources as a promoter. Like, and they might have a team of people too working with them to bring more, you know, to make sure people are there. I would say like an independent promoter definitely is assuming a lot more risk than an in-house talent buyer that's getting paid like, you know, that might be getting paid a salary by the venue or whoever owns the venue and stuff. But it overlaps. I mean, and I think a lot of the people that I choose to work with and over the years of experience, you know, and I probably should diversify it more, but a lot of times the artists I work with, you know, if they have a good experience 5 years in a row with this person and the venues can keep changing, you know, there's loyalty, you know, like continuing to go with the artist or the promoter or the in-house talent buyer that grew the artist, where I'll just normally like continue to try to, you know, keep that artist with that, you know, that same booker, you know, like, and, you know, maybe the venue will change because the artist grows and you want to, you know, you want to keep it interesting for the fans too. So, you know, it's a question that's like, yeah, they can be seen as differently, but a lot of the times, a lot of the people that are in-house talent buyers now at certain clubs used to be promoters and kind of have that, you know, ethos, or I try to find people that definitely check those boxes because I want to book the show and have it go well. I want it to, sell well or sell out. And so I'll definitely try to make sure I find somebody that will promote, and do everything they can and not just be like, okay, now it's up to you. Because the promoter, I'm not like locally, like if I book a show, if I'm booking a tour and there's 21 dates on a 20, on a 4-week tour, I'm overseeing the marketing, plans and, the promotional plan and everything, but I'm not the person actually executing all that stuff locally.
You're not checking the tweets.
I'm not making, I'm not making the social posts on there, like, like I'm overseeing it and making all the decisions that go into like what will happen at that show, like the ticket price, where the show is, what the poster looks like sometimes, and stuff. But, I'm kind of then putting it in the hands. And that's why I want to make sure that the person I'm booking it through is actually going to promote the show.
And like, so that idea, the promoter, like you were talking about, a promoter promotes in different venues, like that is the big thing that you do, right? It's you have promoters that you work with that you trust, who also trust you, that they can bring in a band and maybe take a loss or make no money on the first gig, knowing that you two, along with the band, are working together to strategically build the artist up, right? Isn't that sort of the key relationship?
And I think, there's a promoter that will want to work with you because maybe you work with another artist, and they like, if they book a show for your younger artist, they'll hopefully get your other artist, it's like a game, a negotiation a little bit, but I think most people understand that as an artist grows, there's some loss or struggle, like most people don't sell out their first tour, so there's the building blocks. And I think one thing that I've done with Panache is like try to cultivate a certain, type of, we're known for like the type of bands we book. I try to make sure that we're always working with acts that are like incredible live, too. And I think, you're developing this relationship with these promoters or, buyers, where they trust you. If I'm telling them like, this show will do well, I think we should go to this bigger room, you don't just want it to be a payday for the artist. You want the show to actually do well, and you want there to be people there so they can sell merch. And
and the promoter needs to be there next time, right? You can't just fleece the promoter for a good guarantee.
It's about relationships, and I think we all kind of, those relationships really got leaned on hard during COVID, too. Things, because touring has been a mess. But I think, like there's people that trust you, and they'll be like, oh, I haven't heard of that act, but if you say they're great, I'll book them and research them, and stuff. And that comes with relationships, and we're highly curated with how we take on artists. Like I said, we're small. So we're not just taking on bands and then dropping them like, 6 months later, a year later. There's some artists that I've worked with now for like over a decade, 12 years. And, like it's all about trust. And I think, like honing those relationships with the artists I work with, the promoters, everyone else along the way too.
I'm reading some questions while we're talking. And another one from Paul, he hit me up direct. He's talking about tickets, getting refunds on tickets. And he's wondering like, why can't people get refunds on tickets? Wouldn't it be more encouragement for people to take risk on gigs if they could get refunds on tickets?
Well, I think that, I'm not exactly sure what the context of the question is, but
yeah,
anytime during COVID we've announced something and moved it, people have always had an opportunity to have like a 48-hour window to get refunds. But I think, this is probably more of a, promoter venue question than my question. I think it's probably risky, for them to sell a bunch of tickets and then have the option of people just always getting refunds, and then not really understanding what the show will look like that day. Because based on how sales are, people will spend more money on marketing, they'll invest more money in the show too. So, but that's like the refund policy is something that I'm completely out of out of my hands. That's not something that I, unfortunately, I don't have control over. I would say that during COVID, when things kept, when things kept getting moved, like, you know, I moved some tours 4 or 5 times from 2020 to 2022, 2023. And there's stuff that I've been working on since 2019 that still hasn't happened. You know, like if we moved a venue, I always wanted to make sure that there was a refund policy that was, you know, for the fans. And anytime someone's written me and been like, oh, I didn't get a refund or whatever, I always try to look into it, you know, for the fan to make sure that they're getting taken care of by the venue. Cause I think there's been like definitely a mess of people not realizing a show was even canceled. And then like, yeah, or not. Yeah. Like, so I think, yeah, it's been a little tricky, but normally like the refund policy, it's like, it's out of my hands. It's like the venues or, you know, like if they're using like, yeah, like whatever ticketing company and stuff, it's kind of out of my hands of how they handle it.
Yeah.
In general, separate from like cancellation or a show moving, unfortunately.
So I think we've got like 4 minutes left based on your hard stop. So in 1 minute, tell me how you got into doing management. And then for the last 3 minutes, we'll answer all the management questions. So okay. You started out doing a fanzine, into promoting gigs, into booking tours, but you've been doing management for how many years now?
I've been doing management for probably like almost a decade too, maybe like 8 or 9 years. But I feel like my first official management role was with Ty Siegel, and I was working with Ty as a booking agent and kind of ended up helping him out with a wide variety of stuff. You know, like all the various things he needed on the road, merch, like sending music to labels, you know, like pitching, his new albums to labels. And so me and him kind of had a conversation and decided to do like a trial situation of me managing him, and I, still manage him to this day. So
are you still on trial 8 years later or something?
It went well. But yeah, we're, and then that led to, I think like a year later, Mac DeMarco, who I also still manage. He had just had, I've worked with him since Rock and Roll Nightclub came out, his first record, but I was his booking agent too, and he was seeing a lot of success, and similar to Ty, like things getting busier outside of his means, kind of needing advice. And I, he was kind of being told to shop around, and he interviewed a few managers, but then him and Ty Siegel actually played a show together at Webster Hall. And then Mac found out that I was managing Ty, and he was like, why don't you just manage me? And I was like,
he said, I need the velvet hammer too. I need the velvet hammer too.
He probably was thinking that. But I think when you're still learning something, I didn't want to be cheesy and be like, I could be your manager. I was still getting my footing and like grip in that world. And, but then he suggested it to me and had a series of conversations and then decided to work together. And then, it just kind of organically evolved from there, where I took on other, clients. And I think during the pandemic, I definitely leaned in on the management stuff a lot, because, shows, booking tours and rerouting tours was such a mess. And so I, kind of leaned into the creative side and the trying to grow the management company and diversify it, and now is, like Mac runs his own label, but I'm his label manager for his, his label that's distributed through like Caroline Virgin distribution, and, like it's interesting because you end up wearing a lot of different hats and roles, and you work with a larger number of people than just like the talent buyer venue community, who I love and I've worked with for years, but
but it's like, a challenge. It's a new challenge, isn't it? It's a new way of looking at the same world, just from a different angle, I guess.
Yeah, Lucas from Gizzard actually said something to me during the pandemic that I thought was really interesting, where he was saying that I kind of have always adapted and evolved what I needed to, and in the right direction, and it's worked for me. And I think, it's been really interesting as a manager, you're involved in every aspect of an artist's career.
Yeah.
And so it's like the types of people and the types of things I do, it can be grueling and, like monotonous, or it could be really interesting, and some of it might make sense financially and otherwise doesn't, like where you're doing something just because it's something that needs to be done, like with booking, it was more like you play a show, there's a commission, like it's more like straightforward. but with management, you know, you might work on an album for 3 years, 4 years, and then it comes out and you don't, you know, like it, you know, it's a longer project-based type thing. I mean, booking kind of became that because of the pandemic, you work on a tour for 4 years.
But not for the right reasons. Rebooking
yeah.
a tour 5 times is not making an album over 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, like it's like I like to evolve with what I'm doing, and I feel like me staying interested in like you know, motivated and, you know, keeping things fresh, you know, has been good, especially, you know, because I've been doing, I mean, I've been booking shows for, yeah, like quarter of a century. It's you know, it's nice.
It sounds more dramatic when you say 25 years is nothing compared to a quarter of a century.
But I think I know, like that's why I was throwing that in there. But yeah, I want to, you know, I still love doing it. And I know that what we do is very important as a booking agency because we're unique as a booking agency. But I also really love the management side of things too.
So one of the first questions we had, because I know you've got to go here, most important 3 mistakes to avoid as a manager. Can you think back as you were easing into management? Are there anything you can remember that you think now, oh my God?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say they're even mistakes I've made, but I think not asking questions is like assuming, like pretending you know the answer to something.
Give me an example. Give me an example, because that's a great one, I think.
I mean, anything, but you know, like I think a lot of stuff comes up with like finances. But if someone just pretends they know the answer to something that has to do with financial stuff, and then they could put someone in a really deep hole, you know, like
why is that missing a zero? Why is that missing a zero? Yeah.
You know, so I think it's always good to ask questions, and you're always evolving as a manager. You know, things in the music industry are always changing. I think another common mistake is that you have to be like rude or like really like, I don't know, like have this weird energy about you. You would be surprised at like how many, you know, like, I don't know, like a certain attitude, like have, I don't know, like, I think it's important to be nice to everyone, you know. I'm not saying that I haven't, you know, I'm not saying that I've done that 100% my whole life, you know, like we all have our moments, but I think one thing I've learned is that, you know, you might have an intern that's in your office and then they're gonna, you know, they'll surpass you on, you know, like in what, you know, whatever chain like of music industry stature, you know. So I think it's important to always, you know, respect everyone around you because, you know, not because of what they might give you later, but just, you know, like it's good to be mindful and respectful of, you know, other people in this industry because, you know, a lot of times in the music industry, you're doing a lot that's often not, you know, no one's grateful for or thanking you for and stuff. So it's, you know, it's a hard industry to work in for a lot of reasons. There's not that glamour and glitz that I think a lot of people, like, you know, some people think that if they work in the music industry, they're just going to be backstage and they think that's so glamorous.
Well, you know, it's so boring being backstage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially if you're in Boise, Idaho.
It really isn't. And then I think as a manager, I think you really want to think about when you take on an artist because it's such a long commitment. I mean, if you stick with them and it's probably the most intimate relationship you'll have in the music industry with someone, you know. And I think like people that just take on management like clients and just collect them, you know, like I don't understand how someone can like sometimes like, you know, they have like 10 new artists that they're working with. I'm like, how do you handle all the various like ins and outs of their career? You know, there's definitely a way you're going to overlook certain things and, you know, and it's ultimately your fault. You know, as a manager, you oversee everything, you know, like ultimately you're the glue that ties everyone together in this like operation. And, you know, so you want to make sure you're doing a good job. And if you aren't, you know, like, then you could, you know, really ruin someone's career or life, you know, like you're really responsible for that person. And in so many ways, you know, and I, you know, like a lot of the stuff I do with artists that I manage is also like outside of the music stuff, like helping them buy a house or like, you know, like various things that I've done in the past with various clients. You know, it's just like, you know, they become family, or at least with me. And so it becomes very all encompassing. And so I think when you take on too much too fast, you can't do your job properly. So you need to really assess before you just grow.
Because I think you're going to have to go, and I think that's a good place to stop. But I think that's what's most interesting. Like what we're talking about is how it's just evolved into this thing. it's just, it does seem, when I look back on it after talking about it, I think, oh yeah, this makes total sense that you are where you are, even though maybe you didn't see that. And it's like that I think that's the key takeaway for me, is that it's like you just meet people along the way, like that first band you booked with the 18 dates in New York, whatever. Like it's just so like, and that you're still friends with them or whatever. I think people don't realize that about music, that it's really irrespective of if it's digital or non-digital or whatever part of the business you're in, it's all about the relationships. And the people you know at the start are the people that you'll know for 20 years. And you may as well have those relationships work positively for everyone, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, it's outstanding and it's rewarding to, you know, have those relationships, even if they, you know, there's a lot of people that I worked with in the beginning that I don't work with now, but I've still maintained, you know, strong friendships with them. And I think that's important. We help each other out when we can, you know, because then, you know, sometimes relationships evolve and it's not the best fit, you know, too. And that's normal and natural as well. But yeah, I mean, I think the music industry is, you know, for me, and I think a lot of people, when they find success, is all about, you know, relationships and this mutual respect amongst, you know, everyone involved in it.
Cool. All right. Well, look, thanks very much. I know you got to roll out. So everybody,
Thank you.
this will be up. Oh, but it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. Even though I'm about to fall asleep here after this jet lag. So everybody, so you'll get a link in a couple days, and then it'll be up on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, we didn't get to everybody's questions. We got a couple in there, but I just sort of let it roll, and then it's the way it goes. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Michelle. Really appreciate it. It was great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
See you later, everyone. I'll wave goodbye to everyone as they go. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.